Hey guys, welcome to this week's track guide. This time we'll be showing you the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza in the Cadillac GTP car. So coming out of the last corner you'll find yourself, well in this instance, because it was a hot lap, I would try to get over the line on the left hand side, so in order to save some distance between the start finish straight and where I want to be for the first corner. But usually I think towards the end of the lap it would look something like this. This would be your normal exit onto the start finish straight when coming out of Parabolica. Obviously, as soon as you're done turning, you want to bring it back over towards the right in order to save the most amount of distance you can. But when starting your qualifying, what the hell? When starting your when starting a qualifying lap, you want to try and bring the car over the start-finish straight on the far left-hand side of the circuit. But just so you know, on a normal lap or during a normal race course, you want to stay towards the right-hand side in order to save distance. But either way, this will be the start of your lap. You try to bring the car over to the left-hand side, either very late or early on, depending on what position or what type of session and lap it is. And in terms of the first corner, it's pretty well known that this is a pretty good hotspot for chaos, so it's all the more important to get your braking right for the first chicane, which at full speed looks something like this. So in order to find your braking point for the first chicane, you're pretty much fixated on the meter boards on the left hand side, and your main focus would be this 150 meter board, because that's more or less your braking point. You'll see me transition onto the brakes as soon as the 150 meter board starts going out of view. Try obviously to get most of the slowing down part done when you're traveling in a straight line. You can get up to 100% brake pressure, but ideally you want to be around 85-90% brake pressure in order to slow down the car in the most efficient way possible. And your turning in point would be more or less right as you pass the beginning of this strip of AstroTurf on the left hand side. That's when you start to release the brake slightly and start turning in. And this first curb, it is quite smooth. Obviously there's a slowdown, there's danger of a slowdown eventually. So in order to avoid that, you want to keep the middle of your car beyond this line between the AstroTurf and the white curb. So as long as you're to the left of that from the driver's point of view, you're more or less fine. You try to take a bit of a swing into the left-hander in order to open up the exit as well, or in order to get as straight an exit as possible. And you can use a bit of curbing on the left-hand side here. But be mindful that as long as you're on the curb, you should not really you shouldn't really be carrying too much speed over the curb. Your car should more or less be the weight of the car should more or less be transferred towards the right hand side completely before you start going onto the curb, because when you try to change or when you try to still carry some weight transfer onto this curb, that's when the curb will start unsettling the car. But as long as you're putting your car onto the curb while the car is settled and the weight is fully on one side or the other, it's fine. So, and also you have to be a bit more patient with going on throttle when going over this curb. So you cannot really push the throttle too far as long as you're still on the curb, but you can start gradually putting some throttle on. And as soon as you go off the curb and you feel the front of the car gripping up and the rear being ready to take some acceleration, that's when you open up the steering. And in terms of placing your car on the exit, you can use a bit of extra space on the outside. Like the curb itself, the rumble strip will hinder your momentum a little bit, but if you go beyond it onto this AstroTurf or this small narrow line of AstroTurf, this is pretty helpful in terms of carrying the momentum towards the exit of the corner. And yeah, eventually start coming back onto the track because there's grass strip waiting for you. But you should be a bit patient when crossing back over onto the tarmac again, because as I said, this rumble strip will not be 100% ideal for your acceleration. But by the time you're at the end or towards the end of this gravel strip right here, that's when most of the acceleration part is done, and you shouldn't really feel any effects of the rumble strip affecting your acceleration anymore. So yeah, you exit, eventually start coming back over towards the tarmac, and you make your way onto Curva Grande, which I'm just gonna play full speed while talking over it because it's just flat out sectioned more or less. So you try to minimize the distance, obviously, stay towards the far right hand side, try to avoid most of the bumps, and then you start preparing for the second chicane, which your braking point is more or less right before the shadow of the bridge, but I'm just gonna play it at full speed. So in order to get the car slowed down in the most efficient way, you want to start your braking pretty early on because there's a bit of bumpiness right underneath the bridge. So be mindful that when jumping onto the brakes, you have to be a bit gradual in this instance because right as you pass this, like right around here, there's quite a bit of a bump here. Right as you start to brake, so the transition from throttle to brake should be somewhat smooth in order to not be too sudden with the weight shift towards the front because that can easily lead into a lockup here. So, but yeah, as I said earlier, your braking point is more or less right before you start crossing the shadow of the bridge, and you stay towards the far right hand side, and your turning in point would be right around the beginning of this curb strip right here. And this first curb right here is quite smooth, even though it doesn't necessarily look all that smooth. It is quite smooth after all, and you can use it quite aggressively in order to open up the entry into the second part of the chicane. And same as the apex of turn 1 in terms of where you get a slowdown, as long as you're this time towards the right hand side from the driver's point of view, with the middle of your car of this transition from AstroTurf to white curb, as long as you're to the right hand side, driver's point of view, you're fine more or less. So yeah, get the car slowed down efficiently. Maybe if you try to carry, you'll feel that if you try to brake it too late and try to carry too much speed into this first one, you'll you'll find it more and more difficult to get your car placed exactly where you want it. So yeah, in this corner, especially with the bump on the way in the braking zone, you want to be a bit more mindful how late or how much you want to push the braking zone in this corner. So yeah, as I said, you want to take a bit of a swing towards the left-hand side, start going onto the throttle smoothly again. And this second curb, it takes quite a bit of commitment, because on the if you're a bit further, like if you don't take it properly, it will give you a quite a big unsettling momentum. Like this is pretty aggressive already, and it is quite unsettling for the car. But you should either fully commit going over the curb or avoid the curb altogether. Because half committing, like placing your right hand side wheels onto this sausage curb, will give you a much bigger lifting momentum and will unsettle the car a lot more. So you have to either fully commit or not commit at all to the curb. Both of which can be quick. But in this instance, the Cadillac is quite smooth over the curbs, so it offers itself quite well towards taking the more aggressive approach of the two. So yeah, eventually after you land again from taking the curb, you're on the tarmac again. You wait for the car to settle, wait for it to straighten out, and that's when you can start going on throttle again. And you can use a bit of the extra space right here. There's a bit of bumpiness going on right here, like every pull or every F1 onboard in history sounds exactly the same going over this outside curb right here on the exit of the second chicane. Like there's this rev moment in the that sounded like a dog. These like two or three small bumps in succession, but if you have your car pointed in a straight line, and if you have it settled, it's only a slight oscillation moment in the RPM, so it shouldn't really affect your acceleration, and it offers itself quite well in terms of offering a bit of extra space on the exit. And yeah, you stay towards the left hand side for the upcoming Lesmo section, or the first of the two Lesmo corners, which the first one at full speed looks like this. So yeah, this corner and the upcoming one as well, since you're at a pretty low downforce circuit, it can be quite tricky, even though the corner itself wouldn't be that tricky. It's just a medium speed right-hander in third gear, but since you're carrying quite low downforce right around here, it can be a bit tricky in terms of how you set it up. In terms of your breaking point, there isn't really any available references. My reference would be, yeah, as soon as the apex starts coming into view, that's when you start to brake more or less. So my braking zone or my braking point is right around here. If you can find a reference point, great. I couldn't really pinpoint one at this point, but it's more about looking at the apex and judging the speed in relation to how much speed you have to take out in order to make the corner itself. You start braking, start turning in pretty much simultaneously. You hit the apex right around here, and more or less when you start passing this orange part of the guardrail right here, that's when you should be the closest to the curb and carry the speed and eventually start going back on throttle in third gear. And then thereafter, you try to exit in a smooth way. You make full use of the track available, but also be mindful that there's an off track waiting for you. Yeah, you should more or less keep your right hand side wheels on the white line still. So that's when you're still good. This was quite on the limit already, and obviously the moment you touch the gravel, that's when your right hand side wheels aren't on the white line anymore, and that's when you start getting an off track. But as long as your right hand side wheels are still on touching the white part of the curb, you're fine. So yeah, that's when you start coming back onto the track and start realigning your car with the left hand side of the circuit for the second Lesmo, which at full speed looks something like this. So in order to find your braking zone for the second of the two Lesmos, it's more or less when I would say in terms of meters it would be right around 65, 70 meters. That's when you start hitting the brakes, which seems quite early for this corner. But don't forget that A, you have a lot less grip than you used to with the GTP cars, and second of all, it's all about the exit here. So in terms of placing your car on the apex, you can use a bit of curbing in order to open up the corner even more. But if you do that, it is quite tempting to go on throttle too early. So you have to be patient and start going on throttle more or less as soon as you pass the apex of the corner. Usually you would try to be on throttle like 2 to 3 meters earlier in every other corner, or in every other type of corner in this car, in order to get the car ready for the acceleration zone. But in this instance, since you're going over the curb, and also the angle of the exit of the corner is quite narrow still, you want to be a bit more patient on throttle. And in terms of placing your car on the exit, you want to try and bring it back over towards the right as soon as possible, and also stay on this white line once again with your right and side wheels, because going beyond it, it once again doesn't really, it will start giving you an off track. And also out there, like right around here, there's quite a few bumps waiting for you. So you try to bring it back as soon as you can, because this transition right here from AstroTurf to tarmac, and then this lighter shade of green AstroTurf has quite an aggressive bump in it. So you'll still see the bump affecting the car right around here. But yeah, this would still be good. But if the middle of your car is on this like transition between 4 different types of surfaces, that's when the bump will start affecting your acceleration. So try to be on the right hand side of that as soon as you can. And yeah, upcoming there's a kink upcoming. Well, there's a kink coming up underneath the bridge where there's quite an aggressive set of bumps right around here. But I think the setup, or I've managed to set up the car in a way that the bumps don't really affect your momentum through there, so you should be good to go and pretty much anywhere you want right around here. And coming up, there's the Ascari chicane, which at full speed looks something like this. So in terms of setting up your car for the Ascari chicane, as I've mentioned, you still have a bit of time to bring the car over towards the right hand side and realign it with the right hand side of the circuit. And your braking point this time has quite a good reference point, which is this orange marking on the guardrail and this access road coming out of it, or coming out behind it. So that's more or less when you want to be fully on the right hand side and start committing onto the brakes as well. You start to brake pretty aggressively initially, but also you start to release the brakes quite soon thereafter, because you slow down you don't really slow down that much because the upcoming section is, or the first part of the Ascari chicane is taken in third gear and requires quite, yeah, it requires quite an aggressive entry because there's a pretty smooth curb initially, but these sausage curbs on the inside are obviously quite aggressive. So you want to avoid those, but get as close to them as possible. From the outside, it would look something like this. So yeah, there's like a few more centimeters. Like there's like 10 to 15 centimeters still available towards the left-hand side. But obviously, try to avoid the sausage curbs because they will affect your momentum and your line through this whole section thereafter. And yeah, as soon as you're on the curb and you feel the car being ready to take some throttle again, you can start stepping back or going back on throttle. And once again, there's a few sausage curbs waiting on the inside. Get as close to them as possible in order to take the tightest line around the middle part of this section, obviously, but don't go over the sausage curbs once again because they can be pretty aggressive. And on the exit, once again, there's another sausage curb waiting for you. Once again, get as close to it as possible. Try to, yeah, don't overdo it on throttle here because the car can be a bit snappy because it doesn't really carry a lot of downforce. Like it has a decent amount of downforce still, I think, but yeah, quite a bit less than usual. So try to feel your way around how much throttle you can still carry through the exit and also through the middle part of Ascari. And yeah, you take a bit of curbing, but once again, don't go over the sausage curb. Get as close to it as possible in order to open up the corner. And yeah, right from the outside, it would look something like this. Get right up close to it, but don't really try to not really go over it. And in terms of placing your car on the exit, once again, the final part of the curb, this white strip of the curb right here, will still be legal. But once you start committing fully into the AstroTurf, that's when the off-track will start kicking in. And yeah, that's the whole way through the Ascari section. And you have quite a bit of time to relax after the Ascari section, because there's the last final straight before the last corner of the circuit, which is Parabolica, which at full speed, or I think it's Alboreto now or something, but in for everyone who grew up, yeah, watching F1 through all the years, we'll still call it Parabolica for a while still, but at full speed looks something like this. So in order to, yeah, obviously exiting the Ascari chicane, you're on the far right hand side of the circuit, and eventually you want to bring it back towards the left hand side. But you have plenty of time to do so. So just ease the car back over towards the left, realign it with the white line on the left, and your braking zone, your braking reference would be more or less this beginning of the AstroTurf and this 100-meter board, which comes about 5 to 10 meters thereafter. That's when you start committing onto the brakes, more or less when you pass this 100-meter board right here. You'll see me start committing onto the brakes as soon as the 100-meter board goes out of view. Slow the car down as much as possible in a straight line and start turning in more or less as you start passing the 50-meter board. Like soon thereafter you can start turning in third gear, and try to, yeah, take a bit of time when going back onto the throttle, get the car rotated efficiently, and make sure that you don't carry any sort of rear sliding into this section, because yeah, thereafter is, or what follows thereafter is quite a long section of just full throttle, and also this corner is quite high speed, or relatively high speed for the rest of the circuit. So you don't want to be too over exuberant on the brakes and in terms of how you position your car into this corner. So yeah, try to be efficient and smooth with your inputs and don't carry any oversteer into the apex of the corner. So eventually you start going back on throttle and just feel your way onto the throttle once again. Try not to be too aggressive on it, and yeah, don't drift out too wide, because the AstroTurf on the outside here, which used to be gravel, which, if you ask me, was a bit better or was a bit more exciting to drive. But this AstroTurf right here um, will still give you a decent amount of grip, but it's not 100% ideal. Like you can obviously carry a bit more speed through the middle part, like go on throttle earlier if you commit to going onto the AstroTurf from the beginning. But you'll also see the delta that when you go on the AstroTurf, it will just hinder you the way you can carry the momentum. It will also just make you, or it what Yeah, the most the biggest factor here would be that you cannot turn the car towards where you want it to, and you just start increasing your distance exiting the final corner. So try to stay off it as much as you can, keep some safety margin between yourself and the AstroTurf on the outside, and only use it in an emergency, more or less. And yeah, when you're done turning, or when you feel the car being settled once again, you try and straight line it towards the start finish straight, get your upshifts right, and yeah, that is one lap of the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza. So that was one lap around Monza for this week of IMSA racing on the iRacing calendar. And yeah, once again, I hope you could pick up some tidbits here and there to improve your lap times. And I'll see you next week.